안녕하세요. 국제처 국제교류협력팀입니다. 올해 처음으로 주관하는 해외 명사특강에 와주셔서 감사드립니다. 교직원분들 및 그 학생분들은 들어오시기 전에 있는 출석 체크를 반드시 해주시고 학생분들은 재학생들을 대한 저희가 쿤마일리지를 지급해드릴 수 있으니 지금 대기 신청해주시면 저희가 나중에 출석 체크랑 대조해서 수료 처리를 해드릴 예정입니다. 이 강연은 1시간 반 정도 진행이 될 예정이고 끝나고 질의응답 및 포토 세션이 예정돼 있습니다. 저희는 이제 3시 정각에 곧 시작할 예정이고요. 이 모든 방송은 다 라이브 스트리밍이 될 예정이고 녹화가 될 예정입니다. 본 영상은 SOC119라는 세니차드 로리머비 교수님의 웹사이트에서 확인될 수 있습니다. So good afternoon and welcome to our first intercultural seminar hosted by Office of International Affairs. This year we're going to double our chances to invite the renowned professors from abroad and 4 times more short-term programs to engage our undergraduate students to participate in the short-term
mass of the U.S. elections have consistently attracted large audiences that captivated both our campus and online communities. Today, they will share their valuable perspectives on fostering collaborative solutions with those of differing viewpoint, an essential skill in today's divided world. As Professor Richard often remarks, we don't build the world with our friends, we build it with our opponents. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Professor Sam Richard and Professor Laurie Mulvey. Let's greet them with applause. Thank you.
안녕하세요. Thank you.
안녕하세요.
We are again honored to be back at Konkuk University. It is our second home. Maybe it will soon be our first academic home. So it feels really nice to be here, as always.
And thank you for permitting us to speak in English. So if you need us to go more slowly, let us know. And if you need to speak or have a translation in Korean, we'll do that.
Okay, so today, this afternoon, usually if you've seen us speak before, we kind of work back and forth, and we will do that. I will talk, Laurie will talk, but really most of our conversation is going to be me interviewing Laurie about her work.
Why is that?
The reason is because Laurie has spent 35 years, really, 40 years, I would say, studying conflict. And Laurie has directed the World and Conversation Center, which became the largest conversation center in the world, based at a university. And she managed the conversation, or the center, so that students at Penn State would have dialogues and conversations with students all over the world in over 30 different countries. But in particular, countries in conflict and countries in war. So Laurie has learned a lot about conflict in these years. Plus, we're married, and so she's learned a lot about conflict in a marriage.
As have you.
As have I, yes. But being married to me is, there's a word in English called ordeal. It is like climbing a big mountain every day, okay? You can laugh at that, all right?
But mostly, just when you say, I studied conflict, what that means is I have been in conversations with people in conflict, listening to them for so many years. And I started to understand that there were a lot of patterns in the way conflict happens and the cause of it and what we can do about it. So that's my study has been in the relationships and in the conversations with people in conflict, including my own family.
Yeah. But also, hey, Loki, can we change mics, please? Yeah. I think also what's important, both our country and kind of moved along by our president, and your country are in a lot of conflict these days. And in fact, but what sometimes we don't see is that the entire world is going through a period of conflict. So it's not just Korea, it's not just the United States, it's really many areas of the world. And I think it's important to keep that in mind as we're talking. But you are going to say some things about Korea, conflict here in Korea, what you see, or ways to understand it. So let me just start with the first question. Why? And by the way, we're going to take a lot of questions. We're only going to talk for about 45 minutes, and then we want to take questions from you. So as we're speaking, if you have something that you would like to ask Dr. Mulvey here, please write it down and be ready, okay? Why are people so divided?
And by the way, as we're talking, we're going to talk both about national and community levels, but we're also talking interpersonal. So think about your own life and conflict in your own life, okay? So why are people divided?
Why are people so divided?
Because we are pack animals, meaning we need to be with other people. We're not alone in the world. We don't want to be alone. And so we have a tendency to want to belong to a pack, to a community, to a group. And when we disagree, it gets really scary. And so people run from conflict most of the time and look for the people that they agree with. And so we don't know, so we find ourselves unable to face conflict. And the more we don't face it, the further apart we get, and the more the conflict grows.
And so you would say also that we like to be on teams.
We love teams.
I have this idea that sports, the way people pick teams in sports, is so arbitrary. It's so random. We will pick a sports team that somehow we just like the logo, or the team that's close to home, or even that represents our region or something. And it seems so random that we would somehow have so much passion and so much energy behind that team.
But I don't think that it's superficial. I think that what we get from supporting a team or being fans of a team or something is we get the togetherness of being on that team. And it feels so good to belong to something. It feels so good to cheer for something with other people
who are cheering for the
same thing. No one likes to be in conflict with other people.
Yeah, but
for real.
Okay, but what I see when we have these teams that are really cheering for our own team, we're also cheering against the other side. Mm-hmm. So one side will develop cheers and develop ways of denigrating or just putting the other side down, and we want to beat them up.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it uplifts us.
It
makes
us.
our team stronger.
So, and that's what keeps people so divided.
Yeah, that's a part of it.
The feeling.
Mm-hmm. The feeling that we need to be accepted by a team. Socialization is, how we learn to be part of a culture is really the culture taking us in and telling us what we have to do to be accepted. That's what socialization is. It's like in this community, we wear clothes. Whether you like it or not, we wear clothes, and if you want to be like us or with us, if you want us to love you and make you feel like a part of us, you will wear clothes. And we have many, 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 many rules that tell us how to belong, and that is so powerful. We all know that we will do things that we don't like so that we belong. We will push aside our own feelings so that we belong. It's so powerful.
So as I think like an anthropologist, it takes me back to human beings 10,000 years ago, that we really need other people in order to ensure our survival. So having a tight-knit group of people, having a close group of people around us, ensures that we are going to survive, that we can keep going. Yeah.
And that's interesting too, because when you're in a massive society, a massive city, it's a very different circumstance, and there's a lot more opportunities then to push against other people.
Yeah, but we don't need people in the way that we used to need people. So
for survival, but we feel like survival is at stake.
Yeah.
And it is when you're, a little one. Of course, you're figuring out how to get taken care of, how to get fed. All those basic things are still in play at the earliest part of socialization.
So this is like political and military nationalism, in a way, at the
so
level
funny.
of the state.
We went from little kid getting to like military nationalism.
Well, I'm thinking about survival, right? And I'm thinking that, we rely on our countries and our leaders, our political leaders, really to protect us from other people, which is, I think about right now with South Korea and North Korea. It's what, from the United States, the way the South Korean government deals with North Korea doesn't seem like it's such a big deal, because you're fine. There's a border. It's okay. No, it's not any different than Mexico and the United States. But from here, it's a really big deal. So you feel that energy, that tension. I should say, if I could make a statement about you, because I think this is important for where now we're about to go. The next questions I'm going to ask. I have never, ever known you to cheer for or support any kind of team, a sports team or anything like that. You don't take sides in that way. It's just not part of who you are.
Here's what happens. If I'm watching a soccer game or anything, basketball game, or just two groups of people competing, once one team starts to win, I start cheering for the other team because I feel bad, because I want them to win too.
But then they start
to win, and then I start like, I want the other people to win. It's just, for whatever reason.
All right, well, I think that's a good thing. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that, there's a lot of conflict around the world right now.
Wait, I just want to say something.
Yeah.
I think it's important to say that we all are dealing with conflict all the time, right? Every single person in this room could be talking about conflicts that they're a part of, or what they see, or what they think is the source of it. So we all have that in common. And so why are we talking about it today? I think it's because there's ways of working with conflict that actually are constructive and that actually are counterintuitive. And so what I've noticed is a lot of times when we're facing conflict, we do things that make it worse and make us feel worse. So hopefully, by the time you leave, you'll get a few ideas that'll help you to think about the conflict around you in the world that you're in, and also your own conflicts that you face. Because conflict is actually the source of our strength and creativity.
Okay, hang on. Let's just stay there. For many, many years, you have talked about how conflict is a really good thing if you see it in the right way, that most people are afraid of it, whether it's interpersonally or on the larger scale. And I will say that interpersonally, when you and I get into conflict, you are...
I can't wait to hear what you're going to say right here. Get ready. When we are in a conflict, I am
When we are in
fierce.
a conflict, you are fierce, and I am always prepared to lose the argument because you're smarter than I am, okay? But you always keep going. Like, you're always saying, no, this is good. Like, this is fine. Don't be afraid. Like, just go. And when we argue it out, and you're okay with that. And you always push to get to the other side. So say more about conflict, the value of conflict.
The way I define conflict, even though I'm going to use it differently as we talk, the way I define it is differences. That's it, difference. So I'm here, you're there. You want to eat sushi, I want to eat pizza. Conflict, right? Doesn't seem like a big deal, and for the most part, it isn't. Just a difference. And then then everything that comes after that is where we can get into trouble, right? And what we usually think is we have to decide. We have to pick one, right?
We have to pick either what I want or what you want.
Right. And a lot of the time, most of the time, we are willing to go along with the other person. Okay, you want sushi? We'll have sushi. But over time, what happens is we go along with each other so often. If you notice, most of us are getting along with each other most of the time. But eventually, we get tired of not actually just following ourselves. And so then we may have an encounter where you say sushi and I say pizza, and then it's just like, bleh, I'm so tired.
It's a big explosion of conflict.
Right, and it's no longer about the pizza and the sushi, right? And so that's a funny example, but what if Sam says, I want to have children, Laurie doesn't want to have children. Whoa, okay, that's kind of big, right? And and that, first of all, it's like, okay, two different things. But then what are we going to do about that, right? That's where, no matter whether it's pizza and sushi or whether it's having children or not, we have the opportunity to do the math in a different way. And it's not just me versus you, but we always say 1 + 1 = 3. There's got to be a third way, not just my way or your way, but what is our way, right? And that's going to look very different than what I want or what you want.
But is this so? This is all. So you begin with the idea that this is always true in every conflict.
Which part is always
the
true?
1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
The third way.
Yeah. And conflicts are usually, just like here in Korea, just like in the United States, by the time something becomes what I would call combat, right, where it's like, whoa, we're fighting now, there are many things that are going on. It's not just pizza and sushi, right? It's not just one idea. There's resentment, there's lots of different issues, there's other things that were never resolved. So it's never just one thing. But what I think you have to go back to, differences are not the problem. Differences are just differences. It's what we do with them or don't do with them that creates our problems.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so...
can I just say the one thing that's different in our political life is that there are other things going on at the political level, and there's games that are going on, and when there's games going on, there's winners and losers, right? And that's unfortunate for all of us, because then there isn't a lot of motivation to collaborate. Because if we collaborate, like if we want to rule the world, I want to rule the world, and Sam wants to rule the world, we're not going to share it. Sorry. It's too much. It's too much power for me to want to share. We are going to fight until one of us wins.
So power is based on
Winning.
On winning.
And dominating the other group.
Power is not based on, it's the ability to resolve the conflict, really. It's based on keeping the conflict going.
Power requires us to keep the conflicts going because it's how we get power. It's a game, right? It's like, two sports teams. They're not going to share the win. That's no fun. Nobody wins. We want winners and losers, right?
Okay.
Because you don't win if there isn't a loser. But that doesn't serve us, the people, the humans, to have winners and losers, right? If Sam and I just decide that our life is a game and we are just going to try to either win or I'm just going to keep trying to win and he's going to keep trying to win, we're going to be really unhappy and unhealthy too, right? And same in your families, in your friendships. If your parents are just trying to win over you and they're trying to get you to lose and them to win, of course not. You know what I mean? We have to collaborate so we all win, but that doesn't work at the top levels of our worlds. And a lot of times what's happening is we are taking our cues about conflict from what's happening above us, and that's a game. That's a game.
All right, so a lot of what's happening here in Korea and what's happening in the United States, the political conflicts that we're seeing, it's a big game that's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, and it's not real and that there aren't high stakes. Mm-hmm. There are high stakes. People get hurt because of it. Lives are changed for good and for bad. That's true, but it still operates like a game, a zero-sum game.
And if you don't see behind the curtain, which almost nobody does, unless you've been on the inside of this kind of conflict, if you don't see behind the curtain, you're only going to imagine that the rules that you understand are the same rules that they're playing by. But they're playing by very different rules.
Yeah, or maybe even more important, that we can't solve these conflicts. These conflicts are just unsolvable, irresolvable. Like you cannot resolve having children, not having children. It's impossible. So we live in a world where conflict or these irreconcilable conflicts are inevitable because that's what we see when people are playing a game, just like soccer. Of course, there's going to be a winner and a loser or there's no game. That's what's going on at that level. That doesn't mean that the rest of us can't actually collaborate in meaningful ways. Not conform to each other where I just say, yeah, we're having sushi again. No. We got to figure something else out. We, the humans, the people, can do that in our relationships, in our communities. And we can't look at what's above us as a good example of how to do that.
But we can do that because in our interpersonal relationships, say like in our households, the conflict in our households, there can be a shared agreement about the rules that we're all supposed to live by. And the rules are clear to everybody. And so that means that, we can solve these conflicts, we can resolve them because we're agreeing on the rules, we see the rules. Mm-hmm. But what's happening at these other levels is that there are rules that people are playing by that the rest of us don't know. It's a different world.
Yeah, it's a different world.
I think they're playing this game over here, but it turns out they're playing this one over here. And it's in their interests.
Well, or it's a little bit like, no, they're actually playing a game. We're not playing a game.
Oh, we're not playing.
Like, this is not a game. Your families are not playing a game with how you're interacting together. You all are doing your best to have a good life together, right? And sometimes that's true, and sometimes it's not true. But we're not playing a game. That is a game.
Okay, and the reason that they can keep playing this game is because they don't tell us what the rules are. So we can never join. In fact, we can't even really comment about what's going on because we don't even know what rules are what's being used.
This is actually interesting because I don't know if it can be anything other than a game. And I'm saying game, right? Understand like a different set of rules to live by. When so much power and influence is involved, right? And obviously, for all of history, we've had leaders with extreme amounts of power that most people don't have, right? I'm not sure it could be anything other than that, which is kind of weird for me to say.
Okay.
But at the same time, okay, that might just be what it is. Go ahead and do that game. But let's not forget that the vast majority of us can live with some different rules and some different ideas. And we don't have to believe that when there's a conflict, that's just what it is. And either now you're my enemy or one of us wins, the other loses. We can't afford to think like that, but we do.
Okay, but I want to go back to something that you said earlier, which was that, most people are not in conflict, right? So most of the time, we're not in conflict.
No, I think we're all in conflicts all the time because we're struggling.
But in our day-to-day lives,
we're not actively fighting with each other most of the time.
Okay, so I want to say this. People have asked me since we've been here now 2 weeks, they said, hey, how does Korea feel? Does it feel, how different does Korea feel from the last time you were here? Because so much is happening, and I said, well, it doesn't feel different at all. We've both said it doesn't feel different in any way. It feels like everybody, everybody we've been engaging with, interacting with, whether they're strangers on the subway or friends, and everyone is doing what they've been doing. 99.99% of people's behavior is exactly the same. Yesterday, we were downtown, and a protest march went by, and we watched. And we said, oh, okay, there we go. It was one side of the protest march. It wasn't both sides, And for that moment, those people, there it was. Their lives were a little bit different. But then they will go back to their lives just like they've been living them before. And so can you give us maybe like a sense of hope or something that, we define. So the statement, Korea's in so much conflict. And you would say, what? Take what I said and take how you see the world. How would you respond to that? Because I would say Korea's actually not in very much conflict. Koreans are not, but go ahead.
I think it's like if you go to somebody's house for dinner and you don't know who is who exactly, and you really can't feel like, oh, that's your aunt that causes all the trouble all the time, blah, 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 that I've heard you talk about. Like, as an outsider, you don't know unless someone's having an actual argument with someone, right?
Okay.
So when we're in Bogota, a country at war for 50 years, and I'm walking down the street, to me, it's just like anywhere else,
okay.
Right? So I think when you're in the culture, like in the United States right now, Sam and I, are pulling our hair out every day because we're in the family. We know what's going on. I don't know that we know what's going on, but our news is telling us what's going on. It's telling us we're in a crisis. It's telling us we're divided. It's telling us so many things. And so it's just different when you're an outsider or an insider.
Okay.
That's the first thing.
Okay.
And the other thing is, what are we being told and what's true, right? And so, and I don't mean what's true like fake news. I just mean that it's very hard to know what actually matters to us, the people, and what is actually happening in other places, because it's our country, it's our nation, our community. We feel things that some ways don't necessarily involve us.
Okay. All people.
I mean, all people.
Right. So, including for most Koreans, the conflict that's happening that we see, that you watch on the news and so on, it doesn't really involve them.
Well, yes, but what
For
I mean,
most parts of everybody's lives.
but
it doesn't
conflict
matter.
is contagious, or combat is contagious, right? So, like, if you're at your friend's house, or one of your siblings is fighting with your dad, right? Now suddenly, like, you and your mom are arguing over who was right or who was wrong or what should happen or whatever. I mean, the war with Israel and Hamas, right? The whole world, I shouldn't say the whole world, many people in the world are also in conflict about that. Is that your business? I don't know. For some people it is. For some people it isn't. It really isn't. And so, but it's contagious. And when something's not resolved or something we feel shouldn't be that way, we take it into ourselves, and then we're in the conflict. So in social life, there's a lot of that going on.
Okay. Dr. Mulvey, you are from the East Coast of the United States, the state of New Jersey, where people
Are you going to
talk
talk about talking
really
fast? I was waiting for you to.
All right, okay. And you get excited and passionate about your work. So I just slowed down a little bit, all right? Now,
does someone need to translate any of that?
No, it's good. It's
I'm
good.
sorry.
No, don't be sorry. My God. Okay, can I ask you this question? And I'm just curious, since we're on the Korea issue, how are the marches in Seoul, like the march we saw yesterday? How are they, and throughout Korea, because it's not just Seoul, right? How are they positive and negative? For you, as someone who studies conflict, and most importantly, whose life work it is to resolve conflict and help people work through it.
I'm also interested in justice. And so even though justice, where is there justice? I don't know. I'm also an advocate, just like for the team that isn't winning. I want to help them I want to elevate them.
Wait, so would that mean that if you watched the two marches go by, and the one that had fewer people, you would be rooting for them because the other one had many more people? Yeah.
Yes. So sometimes when we have struggles, either in relationship or in our larger world, we actually need to advocate for something that someone isn't understanding or seeing, right? And so protest is obviously one of the ways that happens in our larger social world. And there's different reasons for protest. It's not just an unheard voice. It's also strategic. It's like war, right? Where you're like, ooh, if we do this, then you have to do that. So there's also that. But I think we have to understand that sometimes certain voices or perspectives have to be pushed forward. And there's a lot of even just passion behind something that has to be pushed forward.
So people have to be public with the voice, yeah.
Yeah, just like, maybe with your parents, you have to get you and your sibling together to just be like, listen, when you guys do this, we can't X. You have to understand that, right? So we need to advocate absolutely as part of life. I think that's positive. That is positive.
Okay.
We need to be able to see things or some people need to be able to see things that can't otherwise be seen or heard. So that's, I would say, the positive side. Mm-hmm. I think the negative side is that sometimes we get into a mindset either as a person or as part of a group that all we know how to do is advocate. All we know how to do is push an idea forward, and we don't know when it's time to collaborate. We don't know when the person has actually heard us. It's like, okay, or the group or society, like, okay, we hear you, now what? But I think especially if a group or a cause has spent a lifetime or years pushing an idea forward, you can notice this in social life. They actually don't know when it's gotten better or people are ready to hear or work with them. And that to me is the negative side. Just like if all I do every time Sam brings up an issue is talk about how in the past he didn't hear me, we're not going to get anywhere, right? Because I'm only going to be advocating instead of being like, oh, we did that. Now we're in a new place.
So another common thing for people is to surround ourselves with people who think like we do. And when I see any kind of protest march or any kind of activism, which I see in our own lives, that it means people who are like-minded, they come together and they share what they're thinking with other people around them, and then everybody sees this big group of people and says, oh, they feel more empowered and more right and more correct, which means that they feel like those on the other side are more wrong. And that is, of course, something that you've discussed often. Okay,
And so the more you surround yourself with people who think like you, the stronger your arguments get with each other about how right you are and how so much different you are from people who you're not even talking to. So you don't really even know. And that just makes you feel stronger in what you're saying and making you feel like those other people are so much different. They're so much more ignorant. You get better and better at your arguments, but worse and worse at actually hearing what somebody else might think that may not even be that different from you if you actually listen. We find that all the time. And I'm not talking, let me slow down. There are people in any group that are more at the extremes of those groups, and they often have the microphone. So we're often hearing them because they're interesting to us, because we're like, do they really think that? So we pay attention to them. Or we love that they think that, and so we give them the mic. And that's not what most of the people are thinking. And so that is, once again, we aren't really accurately understanding what's happening between us. So that's what's going on.
So therefore, it makes it more difficult to build the future with our opponents, because why am I going to build the future with those people who are so radically wrong, so different from me and wrong, and not thinking or not realizing that, well, you probably agree on about 95% of everything. There's a
or
tiny
there's things
amount.
you don't even have to care about whether you agree or not.
Yeah, most of what you disagree about isn't even relevant to the conflict.
Can I give an analogy?
Yes, please.
I think a good analogy of this building the future with our opponents, as opposed to just the people who think like us, is what I always think of building a house or building a structure. And are you just going to do it with the electricians? You as an electrician and all the other electricians, or you and the plumbers and all the other plumbers? No, you're going to have plumber, architect, designers, engineers, and the list goes on and on. Of course, because everyone has a piece of seeing what is necessary to build a house, to build a structure. That is the exact same thing as every other thing that we're trying to build in the world, a policy. You got to hear from all the different people who are going to see it differently. Differently does not mean that they are alien. It just means, hey, pay attention to this. This one part over here matters. But if we don't listen to the electricians, they're going to have a revolt at some point and say, you got to have electricity, everybody. So it really is... It is so necessary. This is a not radical statement at all. We need to listen to people who we think we don't agree with, or who are our opponents.
All right, here's a question for you. How often do you feel as though you have the correct answer when you are in the middle of a conflict?
What do you mean I have the correct answer?
Like if we're arguing, how often do you...
Oh, that's different. I always have the correct answer.
So when you're in an argument, you're just always right.
I think tell me if you think this is true, okay?
About you?
Yeah,
okay.
About me. I think that a lot of times what I'm doing when you and I are fighting with each other is trying to tell you something that I don't think you're hearing.
I will say that is correct.
It's like, no, Sam, if you just hear this part, then you could tell me this part. But it's like that's what I think I'm most trying to do. And of course, yeah, there's times when I think I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and actually, that's very important, that we actually stand on what we think is true in a particular moment. That's another piece about getting through conflict, is actually that I can't just be like, oh, I don't really think that. I really think, you have to think you're right as part of the process.
Slow down.
You have to think you're right, or what you have to say has value and needs to be heard. And so why I say that is because in our world, we've gotten very tuned in to bias, right? Your bias, my bias, your bias. And I think this is really unfortunate. After many years of paying attention to bias, what I've realized is that your bias is actually your positional knowledge. You see something from where you stand that you don't see.
Wait.
And so if we get rid of our bias, we get rid of our knowledge.
You can why don't you stand and do that? Yeah? Okay. Can you explain this?
So this is an image that we created of the parable of the blind scholars and the elephant. How many people have heard of that parable? Anybody? Some of us? Okay, I wish I wrote it myself, because it's the coolest story. It's an ancient story, and the idea is that there are these scholars who are blind, and they all think they see what is true, or they all know what's true, right? They don't see what's true. They know what's true, and what they're doing is just telling each other.
They encounter an elephant.
They encounter something. They don't know it's an elephant. We know that there is a truth in between them, but they are, if you see the parable, you'll see one is saying, it's like a rope, and another is saying, it's like a fan, and another is saying, it's like a spear, or etc., right? At the end of the parable, they all go home, and they don't ever come together and put all the pieces together like a puzzle and figure out what's the truth. They all see from their position, so they all see something that's true, but they don't see the whole because they don't talk to each other, right? They're just shouting, the tail people, the tusk people, the ear people, right? And then they just get better and better at gathering up the troops around them who can see what they see and fighting the people with alternative facts, right?
So they never know that the thing that they have encountered is actually an elephant.
Right.
They think this one thinks it's a tree trunk or tree, right? Okay, everything.
Yeah.
So they're fighting with each other about the truth of this thing that they encountered, but none of them can see it's an elephant. So this then is like what you were talking about earlier, the conflict, that you only see a very small amount of some reality out in the world. You don't see all the pieces of reality. So can you connect that to building a future with our opponents?
Yeah,
what does that mean?
First, I want to say that the importance of this is that it's an ancient parable. Ancient, meaning it's been in the human consciousness forever, and there's evidence of stories even before this that have the same idea. I first have to say that. The point being, we know this already, and we don't pay attention to it. It's mind-blowing when you think about it. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. Okay, so what was the connect?
So link it to building a future with the opponent.
Yeah. So I say, what's missing from this parable is the group leader, the group facilitator, who would ask all of these lovely scholars to come together, talk about what they see. Not shut them down and say, oh, no, you're biased for trunks and you're biased for trees.
And you're wrong
and
because
you better put your bias aside. No. Tell us exactly what you see. Tell us exactly what you see so we can not argue over which one is true, but instead put all of the true pieces together. That's what we should be doing. But, instead, the world is telling us that there's one way to think about something or an opposite way to think about something. And if you're on this team or you're on that team, and whatever one you pick, the other people think that you're a jerk. It's like, woo, the humans are crazy. We already know this. We have to work with our so-called opponents. Our opponents have the information that we need. And if we don't listen to them, it is to our peril, right? If you don't listen to the engineer or the architect or the electrician or the plumber when you're building your house, you're going to be in trouble. The house is not going to stand or be solid or functional. So it's really basic.
Can you, then what would you say, and mind you, everything that is happening here in Korea is happening in the United States. In fact, in the United States, it's turned up a lot higher. And what's happening there has a very serious impact on your country. And it really matters. And by the way, can I just say?
No, probably not.
No, I can't.
Let's start there.
Yeah,
Wait,
I
go
will.
ahead.
I just want to offer a deep apology for our president, for what's going on, because it has an impact on you, and it has an impact on your future. And so...
Yes.
What would you say to the organizers of these rallies? Both in the United States we see them, but here, what would you say to the organizers?
I would say, as I always do say...
And say it slowly, because this is really valuable, I think.
Okay. There's a couple different things because it depends on the issues. Wait, hang on. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a couple different things because it depends. What I say depends on the nature of the protest, right? If it's, as we've seen people, I'll just say in the U.S., pushing for one candidate versus the other candidate, it's a little different than if someone is pushing for the rights of a group of people versus the rights of another, versus something else, okay? But mostly what I say to leaders of advocacy groups is you have to make room for the conversation. Because as an advocate, strategically, it doesn't help your cause to talk to the people that you're pushing up against, right? There's no talking anymore. We've tried talking, is usually the assumption, and talking doesn't work, so we have to push now. It's a version of a war-like thinking, right? It's time to use force because you're not listening. And so, or you're not listening, you're not collaborating, etc. And so then, as I said earlier, you wind up just pushing, and then you push the next thing. But I will always say, eventually we have to make new policies. We have to make new decisions together. And so you've got to be able, as a leader, as an advocate, to recognize I'm going to have to bring in the people who are willing to talk now. Now that you've heard me, now we got to collaborate and figure out what the new policy is, what the new law is, what the new whatever is.
So be careful about dividing people so much that they're just not going to be willing to come back together and talk.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's always what happens.
And when your power is based primarily on division, you run the risk of creating a space, a social space, or a political space, where people are not willing to come back and have conversations.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so I'm looking out. I'm seeing a lot of young people here, and especially the high school students who are here, and who really need to have a sense of hope. And I think, you and I have been able to do that over the years by being too negative and always being positive and hopeful, right? So first I'm going to ask you, before we get to the hope, what should Koreans, and young Koreans in particular, be most worried about?
Now that Korea has an important place on the world stage as a serious world power, because of what we were talking about with the games at the higher levels, the people often suffer because there are now new factors and influences at those higher levels in order to keep the nation or the people who are running the nations or whatever at that level of global power. And again, heightened levels of gaming, who's winning, who's losing, how does Korea stay in the place where it's winning? Those concerns will trump
literally.
the values that you have as a people, as a nation, as a community.
Yeah.
And I think for young people, I know, we're always kind of rejecting what has come before us and like making a new world. I think that spirit is so important, and yet I think all the newness that you're seeing, have to be so careful that you're not giving away what matters to the people, to you, in order to maintain this position. And I'm making it sound very simple, but that is the concern that I have, is that's the game that gets played at that high level, and it's hard to step out of it.
Huh. Okay, let me take a stab at that question. All right, ask me the question.
What should young Koreans be most concerned about?
Yeah. Okay, I'm glad you asked. All right. So I think that, by the way, I think Koreans don't know that I used to be a comedian, stand-up comedian. I tell a lot of jokes. I always want to tell jokes and stuff, but people don't know that I used to be a comedian, and so I live in a different world. I'm always ready to be a comedian, but okay, listen. Your grandparents, let me just speak to the younger students here. Your grandparents grew up in a time when Korea was a very poor country. Your parents grew up in a time when Korea was an emerging industrial and then later post-industrial power. But you are coming of age in a time when Korea is one of the top 10 global powers in the world. And you don't have any idea what that means because you're too young and you can't have perspective on that. But I will say it means that Korea doesn't have the same kind of control over its destiny that it had in the past. It's very complicated for reasons that you said, that you're playing in the world of global gamesmanship. And just in the way right now that the leaders in our country are making decisions that are having an impact on countries all over the world in profound ways. Your parents didn't have that in the same way. Korea got to emerge. But now you have to live with this. And it's good, it's interesting, it's amazing, it's one of the greatest miracles in the modern age, what this country has done. But it has profound, it's a very tenuous position, yeah? So I'm going to, yep. So the question I have is, this is the last question, I imagine that it's more difficult for younger people here to understand some of what you are saying. Building a world with our opponents, right? Becoming, really listening. So what do you think of that?
I don't think so.
Huh? Okay.
I don't think so. I think you all you probably get it more than most people, because most older people, because the older you get, oftentimes the more grudges you have, and you're like, I'm not going to ever work with those people. I hear that all the time, right? Also, I was really influenced by this awesome video called Fourth Grade. It's about fourth graders solving world conflicts, and it's a teacher in the United States does this project with his students. You have to look it up. It's a short video on YouTube. And these students are coming up with strategies to create peace, right? And it involves war, games, and all these things. And the things that they say, they're in fourth grade, are amazing. Humans are amazing. We are really smart, very intelligent, and yet I call it schoolification. We sometimes lose access to to realizing how brilliant we are because we get into school consciousness. So I have no thoughts that anyone in this room is getting it any less than anyone else.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
And if you've spent as much time listening to people, and most of the people I've been working with for all of the years of my life have been young people in college, I 100% know how smart people are because of what I hear them say and have heard them saying decade after decade.
You know what? Especially those of you who, the younger students, and consider yourself more reserved or more shy, Laurie constantly, you run these groups, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds, I don't know how many thousands. 60,000, 70,000.
67,000 groups.
Laurie has sat in so many groups, okay? And it's so often, it's just every day. The quiet person in the group is so often the one who's observing what other things are happening. And then at the very end, it will be often that you will demand that the quiet person it won't last to the end. You can't not say anything to the end. But toward the end, she will really insist that more quiet person speak. And the person almost always will have the most profound thing to say because they've been observing. And that's the role of people who are in this world of conflict. There is a very important role for people who are more reserved and really able to watch and observe and make these connections between things, and so everybody plays a role in that way. So keep that in mind for those of you who have this. Final thing I want to say is the most interesting thing that you've brought into my life, that is really the foundation of this, is to, when you disagree with some group or some person or some idea, go find a member of that group or someone who holds that idea and have a conversation with them and find out all the ways in which I am wrong about what I'm thinking.
And not just wrong, but a part you haven't thought about.
Something that I haven't thought about. That they have
wow.
something, just like on the photo here, right? Just like, this scholar sees something in that tail that this one who's feeling the leg, this one doesn't see. And so this one all of these people can have a conversation, and they each will bring something so valuable to the conversation. And so what you have taught me in my intellectual growth is to seek out the people and ideas that I think I disagree with and find out what's right about what they're saying that's really thoughtful and smart.
And if you are a person who's focused on science, the harder sciences, not the social sciences, you will recognize this as the scientific method, right? You're always looking for something that will disprove what you think, your hypothesis, so that if you don't disprove it, it's even stronger, right? So, but you always have to seek other evidence or you can't be confident in your results. So this is not new at all. It's just the humans we just get so caught up in ourselves, and caught up in each other and caught up in our teams. And our teams are feeding us all the time these ideas, and it unfortunately throws us way, way off of what we actually already know.
Yeah, it's funny. Okay, I want to make one final statement.
You keep saying final.
I know, but get ready with your questions or comments.
I want to hear what they have to say.
No, hey, I just need to say one final thing.
Okay.
If you watch any of the if you watch the videos that I make with my students, the reason I talk with my students is because I know that they can teach me something. And they do. I learn something every day in class. If it's just me talking, I don't learn anything. But I learn from them. But the other thing that's been really valuable for you and I over the years of our lives is that we've had the opportunity to speak with some of the smartest human beings on the planet. Really, really smart people. Infinitely smarter than me. And it doesn't matter what I think about some issue that I think I'm right about. I have learned, we have both learned, there's somebody out there that holds that position who's really brilliant and who will make a much more persuasive or stronger case for that idea than we could possibly make. And what it means is that no matter what I think about anything, there's somebody out there who can show me that I don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Or
and
just expand your understanding.
Expand my horizon.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to see yourself as ignorant, right? I think that's unfortunate. It's just that there's always more to learn. There's always more to see.
Yeah.
And that mindset is what allows me, anyway, to be able to reach across the divide and say, what do you think?
To your opponent.
Tell me how you got there. Because most people that are even my opponents are decent people, Of course, and if they're decent people, then they too want to build the world.
Remember, the next time we get into an argument, remember, I'm a decent person.
Exactly. I know. That's exactly.
You're yelling at me. I'm going to be like, hey, I'm a decent person. Listen.
Please do that. Yeah. Please do that. I will love that.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mulvey. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That was pretty cool. That was really fun. All right. Who's got some thoughts or questions or right here?
Woohoo.
Why don't you use your? You want? I'll do it.
Well, sorry. I really wanted to ask you that you said conversation is important, but as this society, social polarization is becoming more extreme. And as you both mentioned, that in Korea, we could also see this governmental and political things going on. And I was actually wondering if there is a way to start conversations in people who have different thoughts. Because if we cannot start the conversation in the first place, we cannot really figure anything out. And I wanted to ask you if there was any special factor that brought people all together in history before. So I just wanted to ask you.
This is an absolute brilliant question. Yeah. Yeah. It's one I should have asked her, but you did. That's a great question.
I would say to all of us, look for the people who you think who think differently than you, who are just everyday person. You're a friend that's connected to a friend. Start with somebody who isn't an extreme person. What's true is that most humans on the planet are just moderate people in the middle, not really extreme in any particular way, but the extreme people have the mic. And so you just start talking to people. You start building relationships and friendships with people who you've been told are the other side. That's how it starts, because the more resilient the relationships are across the divides, the less people can be divided. So you literally just have to reach out to this guy who's, on the other side. Just become friends, right? I mean, I know that it sounds so simple because it is, actually. In fact, at home in central Pennsylvania, where we live, which is very divided by partisanship, our plan is to go into our community with all of our facilitators, group facilitators, and build relationships with people who are willing to talk to the other side, because there's plenty of people that are. We're not worried, don't worry, about the people who aren't interested in that. Most people are.
Yeah,
So it's like physics to me. When you have a big divide, there's like all this gossip and garbage that grows up between people. But if you keep it, if you limit the divide, literally, the distance between you and those other people, it changes everything. It makes everything possible. And I've seen it over and over and over again with people who are from different groups. And when you meet each other, it changes.
I don't know how it would be with you. Go to the protests, like if they're protesting again next weekend, and go with one group and just ask people a bunch of questions, like all sorts of random. Don't listen to the person with the megaphone, because they have a role, you see. That's important. Said that.
But that's a place. But people are, it's like a sporting event.
But it's kind of fun. Just like be at the back of the line and just ask people questions, like, "Hey, where are you from?"
I think.
And then go to the other one and ask the same questions and just meet people, and it's fascinating. It's so fascinating. You know
what's really cool though, or weird, or not so fun, depending on how you look at it. I always feel like a traitor. Always. Because... Traitor, right? Like somebody who is betraying the loyalty of my group, because I'm always finding decent, not just decent people, thoughtful, caring, real humans on the other side. Whether it's in my family, my siblings are fighting, and I'm like, I like both of you. I'm on both sides. Nobody wants that. But that's when you know that you've walked into new territory, when you realize, I love this person like I love that person. Why can't I just love the people, right? But other people will make you feel like a traitor.
Oh, by the way, get ready for the next question, by the way, whoever has it. But, by the way, if you're one of those people who feels like a traitor, like like you're on everybody's side and you can't, and people are always saying, like, you have to choose a side, and talk to Laurie after this, because we might be doing something in May, which would be really nice to have you as a part of it. Yeah, we're looking for a few of those people. Okay.
I heard that you have lots of attention about Korean political situation.
Wait, hang on. We're gonna use this mic, and I'll give Laurie that mic here, and then okay.
As you know, Korean President Yoon has declared a martial law on December. So I want to hear your opinion about martial law and how does it affect on our country's international status?
Yeah. How does it impact? Yeah. Well, see if you can use that, and then you just speak right into it and speak really loud. It doesn't really, people when. Yeah, when martial law, you declared martial law here, how did that affect, how did the rest of the world see you? It's interesting for me because so many people know that I study Korea and I'm here in Korea and I come often, and so many people were asking me. And the headline came up, breaking news, martial law in Korea. And so I started getting messages from people, oh my God, what's going on in Korea? And I said, just don't, this is going to go away really fast, very quickly. So it's not a big thing.
At first, you thought it was fake news.
I thought it was a joke, you know, like many people here thought it was a joke. Like, wait, what? You know, people.
And I think most people that we talked to, other people thought, Korea?
Wait,
Martial
Korea?
law?
Like, this
What?
is what? But at the same time, a lot of people were afraid because Korea, it's like, you can't declare martial law here. You're too important of a country. This is like the United States when the protesters stormed the Capitol building in 2021 when they thought Donald Trump lost the election. The rest of the world was saying, oh my God, the world's falling apart, right? So many people were very afraid for a moment, you know, until it was just 5 hours later, it stopped. But people were very concerned. And that tells me the role and the stature of Korea on the world stage. But it didn't last. It has not changed anybody's perception or understanding of Korea at all. It just very quickly left. Yeah, so nothing has changed for you. Yeah.
Right here.
First of all, it's a big honor to ask both of you guys a question that I look up to. As you guys mentioned, the Korea is like facing a lot of conflict like these days, and the biggest like conflict that we are facing for quite a long time is the relationship between the North Korea, but I mean that the conflict with the Kim Jong-un, but when we a lot of people believe that like conflicting is kind of like chaotic and really like big disaster. Mm-hmm. So when we like can beat a team with the North Korea, there's a lot of things that we have to adjust and we have to change when it comes to politics. Then it might take a really like a serious and like disaster result when we start to like beat a team with the North Korea. Then is it still like necessary to be like building the future with our opponents, like considering that kind of like disaster?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting question. So if you think of North Korea, the stakes are very high because, you know, you have weapons trained at one another, and Seoul is very close to the border. So there's a lot of danger. But at the same time, you know, it's you building the future with opponents. So what would you say? You know,
Can I?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's very fascinating to me being here in relationship to the way conflict is here between North and South. It reminds me of a family member who is, or families where they split and they never see each other again, right? That's one way that conflict is dealt with. You know, what that does is questionable. But there's always high stakes. I mean, people feel in their relationships that violence is possible or deep cutoffs are possible. But what I'm talking about, I think we always go to the most intense, most extreme, most chaotic examples to see, could it work there? And I think that the work of the humans is actually developing the mindset to realize that we actually have tools so that we don't have to get this far, right? Where the stakes are so high, the violence is so possible, and we cannot negotiate, right? I think we need to actually sort of like, you know, if you don't know how to ice skate and you're 50, you probably don't want to start like on the Olympic ice skating rink. So I would say we have to develop examples in all kinds of relationships of how conflict, actually you should show that one other slide, how conflict leads to collaboration if we don't run from it and if we stand in our positions. And so I would just say that we don't want to happen, but that's how it is right now, and we can't address that in this way as the first step. But the humans have the capacity to do it differently. that's just not where you're going to start. You're just
But-
not going to start there.
But you still, however,
Can I say one other thing?
Yeah.
And there are certain people, or sorry,
no, go
Just-
ahead.
I think
No,
you're
no.
predicting.
No, you
what-
go. You
There
go.
are-
Just don't speak too quickly.
Okay. If you decide to not play by the rules, i.e., I'm going to say the rules of collaboration, you win. So I think, and that's unfortunate because we don't want winners and losers in our relationships. And so when someone says, I'm just not going to negotiate, it's either my way or we say the highway. You know, there's nothing, well, okay, you win because you're not willing to be a part of the human family, if you will. And I really don't want to talk about our current president.
No, don't.
But in many ways, you can win by deciding not to play by the rules. In fact, last week, I was watching some folks on campus playing soccer, and I was thinking to myself, oh, look at that. See, they all agree on the rules. But you know how you can win? Just pick the ball up and just put it in the goal and say, I win. That's how I'm not playing by the rules. We don't, and so, you know, it's tricky. Like, I realize in managing people that there's some people that just decide, I'm not playing by the rules. And that just puts us in a completely different set of circumstances. And I always say, but that's not how most of life is. That's not how most people are. So let's actually develop a consciousness, a mindset for collaboration instead of winning, instead of thinking that the best way forward is to win the argument.
Yeah. And mostly, by the way, with North Korea and the governments of South Korea and the government of North Korea, mostly you have collaborated.
Mostly it's an agreement.
There's agreements, and the agreement in sometimes, okay, they're sending these trash balloons and stupid stuff like that, but you know, and your side is doing, South Korea is also doing things, but mostly there's an agreement to say, hey, yeah, we're going to live. We're going to just...
Two different worlds.
Two different worlds. So it's okay. So it works. So you have built a future with your opponents, you know?
And yet that's not what we're talking about. We're hoping
Yeah.
that there's, I mean, there...
Yeah.
Never mind.
All right. Next question.
Just can you show that one image?
Nah,
No.
it's just, let's go. We have
Okay.
too many questions.
I was
Yeah.
like, I don't have a mic.
Just
Thank you for this lecture. Today we learn about conflict is differences, and differences make creation and a lot of great things. But I make some of the example. We can make creation a lot of things from conflict, but we can fire to operations and organizations. So this conflict can make a lot of things, but its distribution is not fair, and it can make unemployment problems. So I want to ask about this problem for Professor.
Are you saying, because I'm not sure if I heard the details, but are you saying in a work environment, there's people in positions that won't operate this way? Or am I missing what you're saying? And you could, if you want, you can just say it in Korean and someone can translate. You want to do that?
yeah, say it in Korean.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
someone in here who will. Yeah, just say what you're. feel free.
감사합니다.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
그러니까 갈등 상황이 많은 창의적인 결과물이나 아니면은 서로 다른 시각들이 모여가지고 새로운 창조물을 얻을 수 있는 건 알겠는데 그런 것들이 우린 자본주의의 사회에서 살고 있기 때문에 그런 것들이 굉장히 회사나 이런 조직체에서 이루어지게 됩니다. 그런데 그런 조직체에서 생활했을 때 결국에는 그 결과물은 여러 가지 갈등이 모여가지고 여러 가지 다른 점이 모여서 얻어낸 결과물은 그 조직에 해당되게 되는 거고 그 조직에서 고용이 안 되거나 해고되거나 아니면은 국가는 발전했는데 그 개인에게는 할당되지 않는 그러한 다양한 경우들은 그러한 갈등이 우리에게 정말로 도움이 되는가에 대한 완벽한 대답은 되지
I'm going to
않는 것
just
같습니다.
pause you so someone can translate without. Can some? Yeah, go ahead.
So I think he's saying that since people like not in our society, people can kind of freely state their opinions, but something in like a small group or in a company, we can't really freely state our opinions. So I think he's curious about how we can how we can agree and kind of state freely to, you know, the higher jobs and all the higher places.
Especially in a culture like Korean culture where there are hierarchies. So you can state your opinion to the one person above you maybe or next to you, but not two people above. It becomes harder. So how do you address that when there's so much power imbalance between people?
Yeah, this is a work that is for many lifetimes. Like, it will not happen in my lifetime. So let me just say that. I say this a lot, that I see the way this works between people in groups all of the time. I understand also that in whatever systems that we're in, there are other rules that make it often impossible, right? What I also know is that most people are not learning what is the power of a small group of people who you allow to be creative, who we encourage to say what they actually think, because when we do that, you have more loyalty, actually, right? We're always afraid that people are going to revolt against the hierarchy, but when people are given the power to speak, they actually don't revolt because they don't have to, right? So there's many things that need to shift in order for this to be what happens everywhere, right? It's not going to happen everywhere. I want to teach more and more people that the possibility of operating differently is ever present in all of your relationships, and we need to start in our relationships and all the places where it's possible and set up those possibilities, especially in our universities. We need to teach each other, right? Like we teach engineering, we need to teach the physics and the math of conflict. So it's a very big vision, and it's not going to happen except in rare circumstances because we don't have that support.
So one thing that we also see, by the way, which is kind of interesting because we have the opportunity to interact with many older Koreans and many younger Koreans. And one thing that we're seeing among younger Koreans, they're less and less different from students in our own country, for example, that younger Koreans are much more willing and able to put ideas out there into a room with people who are really above them in status and so on, right? You know, this is kind of, I have to figure out where the, okay. One thing that's kind of interesting is that whenever you know how I do my class, right? And I bring people up to the front, and we've replicated that here in Korea sometimes. And people say, oh, no, Koreans will never do that. Young Korean students will never get up on stage and talk. But that's never true. There are always lots of volunteers to say, no, I want to come do that.
And there's many people in the United States that would never
do that.
There
Many
are many
people in the United States who won't do that. They won't talk. You just don't see them because you only see the ones who are willing to volunteer. So there's no difference among younger people, which I think is really cool. All right, how about
another question? Yep, right
here.
over
What is your opinion on the people on the middle ground, such as in Korean, 중도층? That's how we say it. People in the middle ground. So the people who get moved very quickly because of the various information, such as the martial law that declared in the opinion that by watching some like democratic parties and they get moved by oh, Ben Yoon said like that. And is it possible for the people in the middle ground to lead growth, such as I think the one in the very edge of the political cycle actually make the growth of various countries and political situations like that? So what is your opinion on that?
Yeah. So I will. Yeah. The middle class. It's the middle class and the middle people, right? So first, everywhere in the world, the middle class is going through a transformation that is really very significant. And because we're seeing this kind of concentration of wealth at the two ends, it's a slow process, but it's continuing. And so that means that everywhere in the world, the middle class feels pulled in different directions and feels less stable, less likely to know to feel a sense of certainty over their future. Right? So that's in Korea, absolutely. But it's also true in most other more industrialized countries. And then what happens is the middle class will kind of follow the political ideas of the political classes because they will be persuaded because they're seeking some kind of answer to the instability that really surrounds their lives, right? And which is understandable. And then people can be manipulated by the political leaders because the political leaders what they're interested in are, not all of the people over here or all of the people over here. They're only interested in a very small number of people in the middle who change their votes one way or the other way. And so those are you have to manipulate really hard in order to just get these people to change their votes. And sometimes you have to lie, and sometimes you have to play the games that Laurie spoke about. And that's unfortunate because, that they can be persuaded to go one way or the other. And but it's a very small number of people. That's what's really important to remember. Yeah. It's often a very small number of people.
Hello, first of all, nice to meet you. I'm a graduate of Konkuk University, and I actually have 2 questions, if that's okay. So first of all, is regarding the topic and how you explained it. You explained that building the future with our opponents is kind of like building a house, and listening to designers, plumbers, electricians are really important. And I believe that's also really important, but in my point of view, I feel like they are experts of what they're doing. They're expert in designing, they're expert in electrician. And I believe because of that, they have the right to say something because they're associated with building a house, and it's really important to listen to them. So now I'm curious about people who's not associated with building the house. Would their thoughts also matter? Like if a random guy just walks past the house and says, that house sucks, you should make another one. Like, should we also listen to those people who's not associated with the house? So that's my first question. And second question is simple. You kind of said that in the conflict, one could be a difference, and then when it kind of goes over the level, it becomes a game. So I'm curious about what would be the standard or the criteria to become a game? Would it be numbers of people, or the seriousness of if it actually impacts someone or it hurts someone? I just want to know what would be the standard to become the game. Thank you.
Okay, those are awesome questions, which say. Anyway, they're awesome. So the first one is about experts, right? And that is the question that people ask all the time to me, somebody who does conversation with people, right? And so, of course, I think that it's really important to recognize that when someone knows a lot about something, like in our region, hunting, there are people that come to our region, they're from cities all over the world, they know nothing about hunting, farming, those types of things. And there are plenty of people in central Pennsylvania who do, right? And so then they don't realize that there's this person that knows all this stuff that they don't know. So anyway, it's important to have people with expertise, and we never really know who those people are when we're in our worlds doing things. Yeah, there's people with degrees and such. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're the experts. So when we really get into this in social life, what I have found is that we have to find the pearl of truth, the pearl of wisdom inside of the person, right? Now remember, I'm working with small groups, and so it's different than just saying, in society, there are experts and there aren't. But what I find is that when someone feels really strongly about something, there's a reason. They're seeing something that they may not even understand exactly why they think it, and part of my job is to help them to articulate it. So it's not exactly like building the house where you start with the expertise. I'm in the business of finding your expertise, finding why you think what you think, and that does a bunch of things. One, it gives us more information, but it also builds relationships between people, and you really have to build relationships to build the world. Right? And so then, and so what happens then is, like, if you're not really an expert on the thing that you're standing up for, and you're probably going to step back a little bit. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that happen, and it's not a perfect world.
Okay. And the second question, you can answer it afterwards, so that she can answer that afterwards, so we can get from a couple other people. But I want to answer that first question really fast, and then we can get ready for the next person. Yeah, time. We're kind of over time, but can we go another 10 minutes, Luki? Are we all right? Okay.
Can I just say that that's a power? There's like a whole thing.
Oh wait, do you want to stop?
No. You can't ask people by just.
Oh yeah. Oh, all right. How about we do this? we will stay for another 10 minutes, but if you have to leave, you can leave. Wait, should we stop now? I don't know.
Wait.
You have a question?
How about we do one more question,
all right,
and then we'll end, and then we'll be here, and we can talk. We can answer any other questions.
Okay, that's beautiful.
To honor, everyone's time.
Yeah, because people have to leave. Yeah. Okay, but really fast.
Yeah,
lots of people have opinions about things that they don't really need to have opinions about, so just ignore them. Yeah. Okay.
But you can't ignore them when you're in.
No, in a small group you can't. But lots of people have opinions about me that I don't know what they are, but I know they're opinions that I don't need to be concerned about. Yeah.
There is that.
Yeah.
Okay, just have one more. Whoever gets, there's two. You get to pick.
You have to pick it.
Okay, hello. What I want to ask you about is about the feelings and emotions and the conflicts. So listening to your lecture, I thought it's hard for people to have a rational, open conversation when they're emotional.
Totally.
And that it is the main factor that makes humans far from being smart and making the conflict contagious, as you mentioned. Also, this emotion has profound influence when it comes to a group, like a crowd psychology, and it has a lot of influence in real life and also in online. So in short, I want to ask you two main questions about the emotion. So the first one is, how do you see emotion in conflict? And the second one is, do we have to eliminate that emotion in the conflict, or should we just have it while we're having a conversation?
This is actually very connected to your question. Emotion is core to it. There's nothing that can happen if we're not addressing how people feel. And actually, so much of the time, we're actually addressing how people feel. And we have to, right? And so we won't get anywhere if you're really mad about something or you're really hurt by something and we don't address that. And sometimes all that it takes is for you to be heard and for you to realize that people around you have received that pain. I've seen it happen so many times, is that that people just need to be heard. And I don't mean just need to be heard, because also then we want to do things with what we hear, But emotion is so crucial, and I'm really glad you brought it up because we could have spent the entire time just talking about emotion. And, you know, so many of the things that are happening in our social world are fueled by the emotions that don't have anywhere to go, that we don't know how, our helplessness, our frustration on a huge social level. Those are real things.
Like the example of middle class,
Yeah.
when you feel like the future is much more unstable, that's it generates a lot of emotion, you know.
And this is another side. And when leaders or people that are influential use those emotions to stir certain things up or to repress other things, that's powerful. So yeah, whenever this work is always about dealing with emotion. So thank you for helping us center that.
Yeah. And every time we have conflict, emotion is involved. Yeah. Not mine.
Of course
just
not.
Laurie's.
Of course not.
I'm very rational and very thoughtful, but Laurie here. Oh,
but I just want to say one thing. It's really interesting that when people who are very what's the word? They are much more focused on thinking. When they are heard, when their thoughts are heard, that they can actually then touch the emotion, and vice versa. When people are feeling so emotional, when you also let them express that, they wind up being able to then think more clearly. So those things are always working together, and it's so fascinating to see
cool.
what's possible when we change the way we interact with one another. So we should pause here.
Yes. Thank you.
I am so honored to speak with all of you, and truly thank you for listening to this English part of your lives, and I hope that it helps you as you're practicing English, because all of you are doing that.
Well,
thank you so much.
Yeah, and if you can understand Laurie speaking, you got it, man. Okay.
No, we really appreciate being here and having you with us.
Yeah, and if you are one of the, remember, if you're a person who people say you're a traitor, traitor.
Talk to Sam.
Yeah, talk to one of them.
He has some idea that I don't know what it is.
Okay, all right. Okay, listen, 감사합니다. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And we're here. So if you come. I want to make sure we take a photo with all the high school students. Okay, but if you have any questions, we're here. And if you want to take photos or something, we're here. Whatever you want. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming. We will be back in May, by the way. So we're coming back with some of our students.